Hey guys, we're at Brunnemann's yard with Bruce Richardson, who is a vastly experienced gardener because he's done it since he was a little kid. Is that true?
It's true.
It's true. He was also in charge of the
Japanese garden at the University Arboretum.
yeah, and Bruce is the one that you see all the sculptures all around town. That's Bruce. So he is magnificently talented, and he has given us his time. I'm so grateful. Also, we're not wearing masks because it muffles our voices, and we're trying to be safe and distancing, and we're outside, so we feel pretty comfortable. And what we're going to do today is go around and show with Bruce different plants that need to be divided, and how to dig them up and separate them, how to store them, how to propagate them if we want to make more, and how to save them for the plant sale. A lot of this is about the plant sale. So we're ready to get started.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. Bruce, these iris are starting to look poopy, and they're starting to like spread out, and I think it's time to dig them up. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. They're getting a little bit clumped together, and they've been spreading out, so the middle has got old rhizomes in it that aren't functioning. So yeah, it's a good time to do it.
Is rhizomes the name of their root thing?
Yeah, so I mean the rhizomes are what run along that each plant sprouts out of, and the roots grow from the bottom of them.
Okay, cool. And then we got some lungwort in here, and we'll take that and divide it also.
If you have a choice in when you're going to divide your iris, usually it's best to do it after they've bloomed, maybe into July, early August, so you can separate out the pieces with the healthy leaves on them, and then you can replant them. And it's a good idea if they can grow for a month or two, because they're going to generate new flower stems. And if they don't do that, then you'll get sort of just what you got before, where they're a little bit stunted and they're getting kind of pathetic. But if you do it at that time of year, they'll grow for a couple of months, they'll grow a bunch of new leaves, and they'll set a whole bunch more flowers than they would have if you hadn't done that. Doesn't mean you couldn't do it at other times of the year, but if we do it now, we won't be able to get that growth, so we'll get about the same bloom as we got last year. But the following year, they'll be very happy.
All right. Well, let's get her dug up.
Okay. Brian is going to dig up this clump of iris, and we'll just have a look at how root bound it is. Okay, we're not really worried about anything in the middle. Here you can see how root bound it is. And what we want to separate out these rhizomes. So it's got good roots on it. This part's not going to grow anything, so we could take that much off. Usually you want to probably take some of the leaves off. And we'll take the whole thing apart. We want to rejuvenate it, so we want it to grow. See, now this even has a connection of its rhizome there, so maybe this grew another year, so we really don't need that. It isn't going to do anything. Okay, so we could do the whole clump. It probably started out as one plant in the middle, and then it just spread out, and the middle kind of went dead, and it used up all the nourishment in the soil. After we've taken it all out, you could just, if you wanted, add some new compost and turn the soil over down about 8 or 10 inches, and then replant 2 or 3 of them, half a dozen of them, and they'd be happy, and then put the others someplace else. Turns out that this pulmonarium or lungwort has been creeping in here, so might be a good time to dig it up and separate it. You can separate a lot of perennials as long as they've been growing new separate root systems. There are some that just are one root system and you can never separate them, but things like this, no problem. Just want to make sure you get roots. Yeah, there we go. It's got plenty of roots. Now's a good time to transplant them. They're semi-dormant. One thing to remember is it's a good idea to get them back in the ground as soon as you can and water them. These are ornamental alliums. They've already bloomed. They've died back. Their other name is just ornamental onion. They're all in the onion family. There are lots of different varieties of them. And these flower stalks have actually rotted off at the base, but they're growing right here. So what we're going to do is dig up this clump and separate them so we can give them more room, and we'll just get more of them in the future, and the flowers will be bigger and they'll be happier. So Brian's going to come in here and dig them up, and we'll see what we find. We'll probably find big bulbs and some smaller bulbs. So Brian, you want to dig? The main thing is to remember exactly where these were and dig carefully, because you really don't want to chop an onion in half because it might not survive. They're probably going to be 3 or 4 inches below the surface. You can see the roots are still happy and healthy, but they're not growing.
These have been here probably 15 years.
So they really crowded themselves out. So, you know, they are producing small bulbs, but they probably just aren't getting enough energy.
Well, yeah.
These may not actually divide like lilies do. Probably they're just going to be sending out separate bulbs around the edges.
Can we store those, or do we have to replant them immediately?
I think you could store them. I think if you're going to store them, put them in a bag with wood chips or peat moss or something like that, a little bit damp, and keep it cool. Because they're not going to start to grow until it gets warm in the spring. So I'm sure if you put them in the vegetable drawer in the refrigerator, or they'd be okay.
When we bought this property, this whole bed was just planted in daffodils. And the reason I don't like just daffodils, because when they start dying back, it's just very ugly. So I want to get rid of some. Brian, if you could dig right there. Right there.
Right there.
Well, he's doing. There's 3 different species here. Species? Are they called species?
Sure. Varieties.
Varieties of daffodils. Woo! See that? I told you. I told you.
So this is just lots of big bulbs, small bulbs, dividing bulbs. There are 2 that are dividing. We can separate them if we wanted to. And the crucial thing is they grow their roots from the base. Probably this one wasn't quite ready to separate, but those 2 have separated and grown. So you could just spread all these out and maybe plant them 6 inches apart when you replant them, and they're going to be so happy. In 1 or 2 years, you're going to get lots of big daffodils. You can see these are just packed in here. They have filled this space up. They're everywhere. And they're probably even a little bit closer to the surface than they'd like to be. So you can plant them down so they're maybe an inch or 2 of dirt on top of the bulb. Although they're not really like lilies. They don't have stem roots, so they don't grow as deep. But you can certainly separate them all out. So here we've got a bed of Crocosmia that have been growing here for probably a number of years anyway. And they're getting very packed together. One thing to remember about Crocosmia is deer don't really like them, and deer don't really like daffodils, and they don't really like iris. So these are all good things to plant outside a fence if you are looking for things like that. So
They will eat the blooms, though.
yes, I have
They
noticed
love
that
the
too.
blooms.
They'll come and just chew them right off.
Yep.
But sometimes you get to see them first.
Yeah.
So we'll just dig these up. Crocosmias are a little different in that they're corms as opposed to bulbs, and we'll see the difference when we dig them up.
These have only been here about 4 years. That's enough.
Okay. So there, you can see these corms, and there are two of them here, and we could just
Twist.
break them apart. There are actually three, but let's just leave that. Here again, we could separate them, and they grow from the center, so this one's probably going to grow out of that center, this one will grow out of that center. And I would say spread them out probably 6 inches apart, and they're going to be a lot happier and more vigorous. And they grow about, well, 2 inches below the surface, so that's, put them down about this deep.
Cool.
And spread them out.
Okay. When we moved out here, I didn't know how big stuff got. I had no clue, so I just put stuff somewhere. So we have moved stuff, and a lot in this bed is going to have to be moved. And we thought we'd look into dividing up this lamb's ear and get Bruce to show us how to divide that.
Okay, so this was the bigger plant that flowered. It's been making a whole bunch of little guys. Let's just see what the roots look like. Well, they're not actually joined by any stems really. Somehow they're all, well, no, here's a stem that's going through there, and you can see they've grown off this stem, which is really a rhizome. Yep. So we're going to have to pull them off that rhizome. But we've got roots, so that's probably, we should leave that. It looks like we could separate it again, but here you see the rhizome. We could, if we wanted a whole lot of them, you could just cut that section off and it would grow.
I don't know where it went.
Here we go. It's got a shoot. This has got roots. It'll be fine.
Look, you could do that one too, right there.
You could, yeah. Here again, it's pretty easy to see. And this one that's flowered is probably done for.
What does that mean, done for?
I don't think it's going to grow again. I think maybe after these guys bloom, they may die. But they've got lots more coming, so we can just keep separating as long as you get roots. That's the crucial thing. Here's a lavender plant. You can't divide a lavender plant. If you look down here, it's all growing out of one base. It can't be separated. And the other thing to remember about lavender is they're going to keep growing and getting a little bigger every year because you can't cut it down below where you've got new growth. So if you cut it down here and you thought, I want to make it smaller, it's not going to grow from that. So you got to be careful. You can cut it down that far, a little further, but every stem has to leave something that's growing, just as an aside.
I wanted to thank you. You have taught me more than I really expected. And I really appreciate you coming out here.
Well, I feel like I'm preaching to the choir, and probably everybody knows more about some of these things than I do, but yeah. It's fun to share it.
Yeah, it is.
So,
well, thank
you.
And
thank you.